Hello and welcome to the Brilliant People podcast by executive search firm Certitude. On this show, we share stories and ideas from the most brilliant private equity executives, CEOs, thinkers, and doers defining our times. I'm your host, Linnea Jungnelius. Today, I've got an exceptional person with me, Ben Humphreys. Ben is a senior operating executive at Monomoy Capital Partners, a private investment firm focused on the middle market. The firm recently closed Fund 5, exceeding its initial $1.6 billion target to close at $2.25 billion. Ben has journeyed through many of the world's elite organizations comprising investment firms to the likes of Cerberus and BlackRock after an early grounding at General Electric. On this episode, we'll extract the convincing ideas Ben has for working effectively in this space, reflecting on his experiences as both an operating partner, interim CEO, and CFO. Ben, welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Linnea. It's great to be here with you today.
To kick things off, paint a picture for us of the Monomoy sweet spot so we can have that framework for reference for the rest of the conversation.
So Monomoy was founded in 2005. We have a little over $5 billion in capital under management today. And as you pointed out, we recently closed Fund 5, which is very, very exciting for us. We invest in middle market, consumer, and industrial businesses, and we're looking to maximize value for our investors by investing in businesses with strong underlying performance, where we can partner with both management teams and family owners to drive real operational value creation.
And you're part of that large operating team there, which really serves as a real accelerant for your portfolio companies. What are the main tenets of your model at Monomoy?
Monomoy has one of the largest operating teams in the middle market. There are many different models for operating teams across private equity. I think Monomoy differentiates itself in a couple of ways. First, our operating team partners with our investment team to really form what we call an integrated deal team. We get involved very early in the underlying underwriting of businesses that we choose to invest in, and we're really seeking to answer four key questions. First, does the business have a reason to exist? And this really goes to the underlying quality and sustainability of the cash flows of the business. The second is, can we grow the business? Rising tides lift all boats. And it's a lot easier for us to execute our operational value creation plan in the context of a growing platform. Third, we're looking for businesses where our unique capabilities really allow us to address problems and help the company, the management team, family owners fix and address those problems to make the business better after we've left it. And finally, we're always focused on exit, and even at the earliest stages of an investment. And we seek to avoid industries or sectors that are going to make it very difficult for us to achieve a return for our investors on the backside of what we hope will be a lot of value creation work. So after that initial investment, we're really focused on building the foundations of the business. This means making sure that we have the right management team in place, that the business has the right business processes, the right technology, in order to use data to make accelerated decisions. And so that's a critical area of focus for us because we think without strong foundations, it's very, very hard for businesses to achieve an operational value creation plan. We're focused on governance. So first is to establish a delegation of authority, and this is really to empower and allow management to accelerate decision-making. And then we look to supplement the management team with independent directors with domain expertise that can really help them to understand their markets, their customers, their suppliers more effectively, and to provide advice to Monomoy and the board of directors. And then finally, and almost most importantly, we're looking to execute plans that are both good for the company, but also good for the ecosystem that the company operates in. So making sure that we have sustainability of our operations, making sure that we have a strong health and safety record and that the labor conditions in the companies that we invest in are sound, and then making sure we have an inclusive work environment.
Those are four excellent questions and always critical to keep the end in mind from the beginning.
Absolutely.
You've described your approach to value creation a bit more as a toolkit rather than this word we hear tossed around a lot, right, which is playbook. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so a lot of companies will use a playbook approach where they seek to replicate the same tactics with every company they invest in. And by the way, a lot of them do it very, very well and deliver outstanding returns for their investors. So it's not really a criticism of that way of delivering value. I think our toolkit approach is an attempt at being more targeted with how we deliver value creation at the portfolio. I think as has been attributed to Mark Twain, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And when I look at and decompose the underwriting of value creation, 25% of it comes from pricing, and 20% of it comes from strategic sourcing, and 20% of it comes from labor optimization. And then there's a long tail of value engineering and working capital optimization and unit economics optimization. And so, when we're tackling this diversity of potential levers for value creation, making sure that we're very, very targeted in applying the right tool to the specific problem at the portfolio company is very, very important. I also think that the toolkit enable us to be focused. If everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. And what we've found is it's very, very important to try to tackle the 3 to 5 things that are most critical for value creation. And so, the toolkit allows us to address the specific problems the company faces and to make sure that we're focused on the most important levers for value creation.
I hear that a lot, really pulling it all in and pulling it together to really focus in on the most important matters first. Do you find what your ideas are kind of walking into the deal from due diligence, those top 2 or 3 priorities frequently become the ones post-deal? Or do you find that learning that you get to do afterwards and as you look at the toolkit, it changes a bit?
I'd like to think that we're right
Yeah.
most of the time when we're doing diligence. I certainly, would probably be dishonest to say that we have a flawless track record in identifying the 3 to 5 most critical things. And that list can evolve over time through the course of investment. It's not chiseled in stone, it's written in pencil. But if we don't have a limited list of really actionable things, it's very, very easy for the company and the management team to get paralyzed. And so by keeping that list short and making sure that we drive each individual item to conclusion as quickly as possible, we find that we end up with better outcomes and results. I do think that the fact that we have this integrated deal team approach, some of our competitors, by the way, again, do a great job with this method, not criticizing them, but just different for us, where the investment team will make an investment and then kind of kick it over to the wall to the operating team. I think the fact that we're involved so early in the initial underwriting gives us an advantage in making sure that we have a higher batting average in identifying the really 3 to 5 most critical things.
That's great. And if I look at what we do in executive recruiting, I could say very similar things, right? Hone in the scorecard, focus in on the top priorities, right? And that's how you're going to get to
Well, when you work with us, that's how you guys do it. So
That's right. But look, you've got the benefit of a lot of perspective, and you've been exposed to many, many companies, many teams, many models at Monomoy and elsewhere. When things do go wrong, where do you see that happen?
So 90% of the time when things go wrong, it's because we don't have the right management team in place. And, when I sort of decompose that challenge, it's very infrequent that we just hire management teams that are incapable, that are not smart, that don't have domain expertise, that don't have knowledge about this specific business or function that they're responsible for managing. It really comes down to communication and the relationship that they have with the sponsor. Some managers view the sponsor as a once-a-quarter obligation, and that might work in some contexts where, you have a very investment-focused orientation to value creation. Our operating focus, I think, requires a different relationship with management. Now, look, we're not trying to run the companies from our offices in New York or Greenwich. We want empowered, independent executives who are leading the businesses, but we do believe that we have unique capabilities that can help the management teams to accelerate value creation. And so we're really looking to partner with managers who see the value that Monomoy brings. And when we don't have that level of partnership, that's when we have challenges. And, my most challenging experience, working with the CEO, the business was performing fantastically well, executing really on all cylinders. We made a decision to invest in an ERP implementation. because of the performance of the business, I sort of stood back and let the team go, obviously not wanting to hold them back. And I didn't lean in to the ERP implementation. And, the ERP implementation, to say the least, was challenging. That ultimately resulted in a transition with the CEO. And really the learning for me is that I'm looking for those partners who want to engage, who want to work with Monomoy, who want to leverage all of the capabilities that we offer. That's, of course, just not to say that we want to run the company, and that's always the fine line that we need to balance. But yeah, when things go wrong, it's almost always because we don't have the right management team.
Right. Partnership is the key word there. And like you said, over-communicating is part of what helps that partnership to thrive. Is there anything else that you've found helps to set the stage for success in forging closer partnerships early on that you think about as you integrate with that new portfolio company?
With the CEOs who I partner with today, I feel like we have incredibly strong personal relationships, that allow us to work more effectively through the most challenging business issues. I also had an experience as an interim CEO at one of our portfolio companies, and I know I've had many CFO experiences through my career. And I think those experiences helped me to be a little bit more empathetic to what our CEOs and management teams more broadly are facing on a day-to-day basis. Financial sponsors, private equity sponsors can be demanding, can be impatient. I'm probably part of that group. But I do think that the best relationships are forged out of a strong personal connection, as well as operating partners who have empathy for the challenges on a day-to-day basis that the management team is facing. That combination of things yields the best outcomes.
That's great advice, and something I've heard from others who've taken that leap and been in an interim role or in an operator role, if you will, that they've brought back. So that's good advice for people who haven't been there to think a little bit more empathetically, or how can they plug in to look at things from that angle as well. At times, changes have to be made on the management team, although that's never the outcome anybody wants. What lessons can you share on how to get the right team in place if that has to happen?
Well, I think this is a little bit linear where you and your team at Certitude come in. You've been incredible partners for us, and I expect will be incredible partners for us as we go forward. So, obviously having the right sourcing capability for talent outside of the organization is critically important. And making sure you're working with partners who think the way you think and who understand your culture, just super important in making sure you get the right management team. So another area I think recently that I've started to have a little bit more success in is also thinking about talent more portably across our portfolio. So we have tremendous talent at the next level down in our portfolio, not just at the senior most leadership levels, and giving some of those leaders the opportunity to step up in more senior roles in other portfolio companies where their capability and skill set is portable has been a real accelerator for us. I wouldn't say we're perfect at it, but we've started to do that more and more frequently. And I found that to be an incredible accelerant to getting roles filled and getting people who I know and trust into those roles. There's nothing like having worked with someone for a couple of years to know their strengths and weaknesses and to be able to understand your relationship with them and how you work. And I think that's all, critically important. I think from a process perspective, we do many of the same things I think everyone else does at this point. We hire the best executive search firm. We use a combination of behavioral assessment, psychometric assessment, case study to sort of shepherd people through the process in hopefully as quickly and painless a way as possible. Your colleagues would probably say it's not always as painless as possible. We try our best. But again, at the end of the day, I really think we're trying to find those people who view Monomoy as great partners and someone who's going to be an accelerant to their personal success and their organization's success. And to me, that X factor is the key thing that I'm looking for, when we're trying to make a decision to hire any member of the senior management team. And then hopefully that they're looking some flavor of that for them when they're hiring in the rest of the organization.
The thing that you hit on there, both with whether it's about the partnership with the search firm that you work with, or it's about the talent, it's about fit. And it's about being in it together. And so I think the lessons you shared earlier around building partnerships, they apply here too. Whether it's on the management team or the level or two below that. And I think the reason you can make those moves is because that trust, that known entity, and you know how they will plug in and how they might complement or supplement other people, other teams. And I think it's about thinking about it in that kind of holistic way that's so critical.
I think that's a great articulation. That fit component, and for us, again, I keep bringing it back to that X factor of fit for us is wanting to be a partner, right? Wanting to engage and work with our team. That's not to say wanting us to run the company on their behalf, but wanting to ask for help, wanting to ask for advice, wanting to help us to deliver resources they may not have natively in the company on an accelerated basis. Those are all things that we can deliver to a management team. And, there are some great managers who want that, and there are other great managers who kind of want to be left alone and check in every quarter. And so we're obviously looking for the former rather than the latter.
Exactly. I think alignment is probably one of the words there that I think I'm hearing. So look, once you get the right team in place, how do you enable that team to really thrive, to help their strengths to grow? And is there anything you took away from recently being in an interim CEO role?
Yeah, I think I touched on it a moment ago. I think this notion of being empathetic and understanding, having walked a mile in their shoes, so to speak, is an important part of that. Wherever possible, I try and seek to eliminate non-value-added interaction. So I'm not looking for a whole slew of reporting to fill the file. We want to have reporting that's meaningful and tied into the 3 to 5 things that really drive the business forward. We want to make sure that the management teams have every possible resource they can have to execute their plans. And to the extent that we have resources in our network or on our team that they wouldn't have access to normally, we want to make sure they get access immediately and they're there to help them. So I think those are the critical things that we try to deliver. On a personal level, I'm always trying to remember my experience when I'm working with management teams, and just remember, these are like really hard jobs and there's a lot of pressure. These are people who are wired to want to succeed, and it's not a straight line up and to the right, even in the best of companies. And so recognizing that management teams are going to have setbacks, things are going to go wrong, and being supportive, not overreacting, but making sure that we help to course correct when things do go wrong in an empathetic way, I think is critically important.
One thing I want to pick up on that you mentioned is value-added interactions. And it's funny, right? It sounds quite business-like, but I think it's super important. Like how to make best use of your time, especially with people. Because again, we know that in private equity, we are dealing with this limited window that we're going to go in and we're going to create value for everybody involved. And we got to realize the return of the investment. So that sort of intensifies both the focus and the pace that's required to succeed in this space. How do you make the best use of every day, every hour, on the calendar, right? Both from a macro strategy perspective, but even down to how you prioritize your projects or your personal calendar.
Yeah, I love this question. It's so important. Because in private equity, we're not permanent capital. We have a limited time where we are stewards of a business, and we're on the clock the day we close to deliver on behalf of our investors, to build and leave a better business for employees and customers and suppliers. And so the pace of change just has to be faster than it is in publicly run organizations that have the benefit of time. And so this is where I would go back to those 3 to 5 things. We just have to be critically focused and organized around making sure that we execute on the 3 to 5 things that most matter to the business at that time. Those 3 to 5 things will change over time, They'll mature. Hopefully we'll complete some and we'll add a new 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 to the list. But that's how I try to organize my time, the management team's time, and our interactions together. I can't say I get it always right. I mean, I'm sure my colleagues would say there's some waste in there. Hopefully the waste gets lower and lower over time. But that's at least the thinking that goes into, macro organization of time. I would say on a micro level, like calendar management is like a disaster for me.
You and everyone.
Yeah, I'd love some tips on this. I've read all kinds of books on it and ways you're supposed to organize it. And I color code my calendar and it looks like the rainbow. I mean, I have 4 businesses that I focus on today. They're all fantastic businesses with great teams. But prioritization on a day-to-day basis, a minute-to-minute basis is super hard because I want to make sure that I'm giving my all to help them be them as successful as they can be. And, I don't always get it right. I think the macro I'm way better at. We collectively, and from an industry perspective, are way better at than the micro. Any time management gurus out there who end up listening to this would appreciate the hit on how to organize my time on a day-to-day basis a little more effectively.
Noted. We'll get someone on to talk about that too. That'd be great. So we talked about time. Now, another component of this job as an operating partner is you're involved with 4 companies. I'm sure not all 4 of those businesses are in the same place. And to have that connectivity to operate at pace requires travel and spending time with those people in those locations. So how do you handle all the travel? Are there any hacks or things around that?
So first of all, I think that the insight there is super, super important. I'm a huge believer that there's tremendous value in in-person interaction. I know in COVID, technology, allowed us to interact virtually. And it's not to say there's no benefit of virtual interaction, but it is so much more impactful from a relationship perspective, from a actual factual, tactical perspective to walk a plant floor and talk to someone who's operating on that floor versus seeing a presentation on the Zoom or watching a video on the Zoom. So you're 100% right. I think private equity operation partners done well requires being on the road. I guess I would start my travel hacks would be I'd like to thank my sponsors, United, Marriott, National Rental Car. No, just kidding. But I do think that having partners that allow you to get upgraded once in a while makes your life a lot better if you're, 200 days a year on the road and 80, 90 plus flights a year. My only advice would be never take an evening flight in the summer. 6 a.m. flights are the only ones that ever leave and land on time. I don't really have the travel thing figured out. I don't fly private, so I'm back of the bus and coach like everybody else. And so those little upgrades every once in a while from United, thank you very much, are super, super nice and helpful. So
a little bit extra comfort. I talked to somebody else. They bring their own pillow to have a sense.
I've seen all kinds of things. I've seen people with contraptions that they put on the table that folds out and they sleep on it. And you see all manner of things when you're traveling as much as the private equity operating partner does.
Yeah. Look, we've talked about operating partners needing to have high energy. We've talked about operating partners needing some empathy, great communications, right? Because of all that you do. Adding to that list, are there any other defining qualities of what you think makes for a really extraordinary operating partner?
Yeah, I think you've hit on a couple of them. I think that a successful operating partner starts with humility. Our job is to make the management team successful, sort of period, full stop. And so that sometimes means you get blamed for the rain, no praise for the sun. And I think as an operating partner, you've got to get energy from watching your teams be successful and candidly be a little bit in the limelight and be celebrated. And you've got to be comfortable with that. That's got to give you energy. You've got to be excited by that. I think there's a lot of people who are incredibly talented executives who become operating partners who lose personal energy because all of a sudden they're not getting the credit anymore. And so I think there's a degree of comfort with being personally disassociated with the credit for an outstanding investment that is really, really critically important. I also think that templates only go so far. And I think in the private equity operating partner universe, there's been an attempt to try to reduce the operating partner role to a series of templates that people then fill out that magically yield the answer. And of course, there's value in the templates. I would say mostly at this point, all the templates are the same across the industry. I don't think anyone necessarily has a materially better template than anybody else, although there are some good ones out there. So I do think that like individual capability, brilliance, to use, the title of the podcast, really does matter. I think the best operating partners just think differently and execute differently. And, when we try to reduce the differentiated capability to a template, I just don't think you get the best work out of operating partners.
Lots of great insight there. And I think you're right. It's about the individual as much as the job that needs to get done. And it's about pulling those two things together, and then you're off to the races, right? Now, one other thing I want to kind of dive into is look at Monomoy. You have a group of more generalist operating partners. How do you think about kind of the generalist versus mix of functional specialists and kind of the combination that different firms, apply differently?
Yeah, again, there's no set model. As you point out, there are a number of firms that use a specialist approach where they organize their operating team around sort of functional expertise. So they'll have a go-to-market team or a commercial team. They'll have a supply chain or sourcing team. They'll have a finance team, digital or technology, on and on and on. And again, there's nothing wrong with that approach. That can yield fantastic returns, and there are lots of firms that do extremely well leveraging that approach. I think what we find in the middle market, what I believe, is that, it's very difficult to scale that approach to the middle market, where you don't necessarily have across your portfolio the issue that functionally specialized teams are capable of solving. And so the generalist model allows you to bring a broader suite of capabilities to what is inevitably a broader suite of potential problems. So we're organized as a generalist model, as you articulated. We also leverage a lot of incredibly talented data, finance, FP&A, associate, senior associate, vice president level resources to really sit with the CEOs, with the CFOs, help them organize data, develop insights from the data, all with the purpose of being able to make decisions faster. And so that combination of generalist leadership with data and analytics focus, we think is a sort of killer combination. Again, we don't have a monopoly on how this is organized, but in the middle market, I think that sort of brings the best of all worlds. And then, we'll use third-party partners in highly specialized situations to bring in the specific functional expertise, if it's required, that we don't have on a one-off basis.
Great insight. And to prove your point, right, look, you guys are very successful and lots of other firms are also very successful. And so there's proof that multiple models work. I think you have to have a strategy and you have to lean into your style, your philosophy. And, that's how firms, I think, get great results.
I think that's exactly right.
Let's pivot a bit more to the personal angle because, again, paying attention to the whole person is often what unlocks difference in performance. We like to say, businesses shine when people shine. What factors in your life allow you to show up as your best self every day?
So I think you know this story because we've been friends for a long time now. So I got into private equity really at the strong encouragement of my wife, who I've been married to for over 20 years. So I started my career at GE, and I loved GE. I still love GE. The late days of Jack Welch, the early days of Jeff Immelt, GE was just a magical place to grow up in and learn and receive training in. And I never imagined I would leave. And then I had a boss who took a job at Cerberus Capital, and he offered me the opportunity to go with him. And I sort of turned to my wife and said, Christine, like, I'm never going to leave GE, right? And she's like, you're crazy not to go to Cerberus and take this opportunity and go into the private equity universe. And so without my wife's strong encouragement and probably telling me to do it, I never would be on the career path I am today. And, our relationship and partnership is what has been like central to any professional success I've had. So I'm super fortunate and blessed to have a, lovely wife who's been so supportive of my career. And we have 3 lovely kids. When I'm traveling all over the place, she makes sure that they're getting everything they need, and they're fantastic. And I have so many friends who've had, challenges with children. I mean, it's hard raising any kids, and, I'm sure we'll have our challenges, in the future, but, knock on wood, our kids have been great.
That is the right answer. Also, you're forgetting one very important individual as part of this family. Man's best friend.
Oh, Bear, my dog. Yeah.
Yes.
So you know the story of Bear. So I got Bear at a charity auction in New York. I'll spare your
this is such a great story, though.
Listeners, all the details, but needless to say, there must have been at least 100 billionaires in the room when I managed to get Bear at this charity auction, and there was
not intended.
Yeah, not intended. There were some fantastic things being auctioned off, like LeBron James hosting you at his house. But in any event, Bear was the first live auction thing they brought out to bid, and this 2-month-old golden retriever. And, I'm showing off in front of my friends. Maybe I'd had one or two too many cocktails. In any case, I bid on Bear. First bid out of the gate. There was another bid in the crowd. Again, continuing to show off. I was the 3rd bid. I figured with 100 billionaires in the room, there's no way I'm winning this dog. And going once, going twice, going 3 times, all of a sudden, Bear is mine. They bring a 2-month-old, a golden retriever to my feet in the middle of Cipriani in downtown Manhattan. I try at this point, I had a BlackBerry at this time, so I'm trying to send a picture of Bear to my wife, who can't believe that I've done this and still thinks I'm playing a joke on her. And in any case, I get home eventually with the dog, and I'm carrying him through the front door, and my daughter, who must have been 5 or 6 at the time, and my son, who must have been 18 months old, greet me with my wife at the door. And my wife looks at me and says, "That's not a dog, that's a bear." And so that's where Bear's name comes from. So anyone with little kids thinking about a dog, I'd highly recommend a golden retriever, because there's nothing better for kids than a dog, and no dog better for kids than a golden retriever.
Yeah, so. Dogs are incredible and make human life just so great. Look, besides being inspired by your family, and you touched on another super important thing, right? Like who you surround yourself with, incredibly important. Are there any leaders that are inspiring you lately?
I think what Sam Altman is doing to build AI responsibly is incredible. And without really understanding all the leadership challenges that they clearly had, it's amazing to me that they've been able to go through all of that and come out the other side, at least from my 30,000-foot vantage point, a better and stronger company. And the love and admiration and respect his team clearly had for him to basically veto the board and say, we'd rather have Sam than work at this company. I mean, I think any CEO or leader should aspire to that level of love and loyalty from their team. So I'd put him up there. I think what Peter Attia does in health and longevity is super interesting and important work. I listened to his podcast, The Drive, and like little changes in my life I try to make based on that listening. So I think he's incredibly inspirational and helpful to people in general. And then without being too political, which I know this is probably a dangerous one, but like I think Elon Musk, from a sustainability perspective, effectively creating electric vehicles, trying to make humans an interplanetary species with SpaceX, trying to defend free speech with Twitter. I know that Elon's a controversial figure today, but in terms of a business leader, and technologist who's done more and doing more for everyday people. I mean, it's hard to think of one alive today that's done more than Elon Musk. So I might not agree with every one of his memes or tweets that he sends out. I think he's a pretty amazing leader.
Yeah. Those are three great examples. And I think with Elon, I think really it's what is inspiring there is he/any leader that has this ability to put a big mission out there.
Absolutely.
Like, almost in some cases, like they have this disillusioned idea about what can be accomplished. But it is that thing that is truly inspiring and people will follow typically when somebody believes so passionately that something can be done. So I think that's the kind of the takeaway there is to like dream big and go after it. And I think that encourages followership.
Yeah, with those three businesses that I cited, I mean, he also has Neuralink and The Boring Company. I'm sure he does thousands of other things I'm not even mentioning, but each of their mission, this is the greatest example of mission-based leadership, I think, that exists in modern business. I mean, the Tesla around sustainability, their mission is so clear. SpaceX around the preservation of humanity and making humanity an interplanetary species is so clear. While people may not agree with how he runs Twitter, the notion of protecting free speech, that's his articulated mission for the company, is super clear. So I think all business executives, none of those articulations are about making money. But he's made a ton of money, by the way. He's built incredibly powerful, incredibly well-performing companies. So I think that focus on mission-based leadership is just really inspiring.
Truly. I agree. And then I think the other piece you touched on with the first example, right, with Sam Altman is like, what is leadership? Like, can you be a leader without having followers, And I think that's the thing I'm hearing there is great leadership. It is people who are able to bring people along and people want to follow because, again, there is that connection there to that person and that idea and how they're able to foster that engagement amongst a workforce, a management team, or other people that are just in the fandom or the community or the society that surrounds that business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I've never seen an entire company willing to quit because the CEO is fired. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. Any other sources that you draw inspiration from? You mentioned, obviously, The Drive, the podcast, other books, quotes, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I listen to All In, the podcast, every week, sort of religiously. I was desperate to go to their summit this year and couldn't make it work for work or family reasons. But next year, assuming I can get a spot, I would love to go. So I think they're a fantastic mix of people. And the thing I love about, Chamath and Jason and David Sachs and David Friedberg is their ability to disagree with one another and love each other at the same time. We just don't have enough of that at work. We don't have enough of that in society more broadly. And they're trying to create a platform where people can disagree and talk rationally, I think is just so needed and so welcome. And then the other one I listen to is Pivot with Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. And I think their sort of interpersonal dynamic and the way they approach issues, almost like antithetically to the way All In approaches issues, is great. So I listen to those two podcasts religiously, and then I'm always good for a James Rollins, techno thriller book. Probably, I think that's above trash reading personally, but my wife might disagree. So
great additions. Gosh, my podcast list, my content list just keeps growing.
I know you keep turning me on to some great ones, but I just don't have the time to listen to them all.
This is too revealing, but sometimes I will put it on that like 1.25.
It has to be done. It has to be done.
It has to be done, but it's not the same. Gosh, people's voices get distorted by the things we do to fit everything into our days. The one thing, though, I think that you mentioned that I think is worth highlighting even further is just conversation where you sit down and you realize that everybody comes to topics, to conversations, to work, to life with different perspectives. and being able to hear and truly listen deeply to what somebody else has to say based on their experiences, the moments and the touch points and the content, the conversations they've digested in their life. And then just kind of trying to understand that person and doing the same for you, but creating that forum. I agree. We need more of that. Anyway, we are right at the finish line here, and we love to finish our Brilliant People podcast by defining brilliance 6 different ways. So if you could please fill in the blanks. Purpose is.
Purpose is delivering for our investors.
Leadership is.
Leadership is empowering and aligning the team to accomplish great things.
Success is.
Success is building great companies.
Brilliant leaders are.
Brilliant leaders have integrity, they're accountable, and they're empathetic.
Great answer. Brilliant operating partners are.
Brilliant operating partners relentlessly drive for results, are humble, and are great partners to their management teams.
I perform at my best when.
I perform my best when my hair is on fire.
That was a great way to wrap it up, Ben. So fun. Such great conversation, such great insight. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you to Ben Humphreys of Monomoy for joining us on today's episode. I hope all of you walk away inspired by the powerful reminder of the limited time we have to achieve what matters at work and in life, and to make the best use of every day and every person we surround ourselves with. And thanks to you, our listeners, for tuning in. That's it for this episode of the Brilliant People podcast. I'm Linnea Jongnelius. If you found this conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show. And follow Assertitude on LinkedIn for the latest insights on how to lead and perform at your best. Until next time, stay brilliant at work.